80-year-old woman takes the stage and tells her story of how when she was a girl, she and her sister Betsy were taken to the Ravensbrück concentration camp. This was a place that the Nazis were sending people, and they were execution camps. They would make them work. They would go to bed. And in the morning, people would be missing from their bunks. The next day, another train would come in with another load of people. They would work. And then they would do roll call, and people would line up. One group would head back to the barracks. The other would head off to a brick building set off in a field a little bit away from the camp. And in that room, the people would walk in with the soldiers pushing them and shoving them with their guns, beating them over the head with the butt of their rifles. Once everybody was put inside, the doors were shut, and the room was filled with gas. Day after day after day. Everyone in the camp was given a number tattooed onto their wrist. Permanent. This was who you were. This 80-year-old woman took the stage and told her story. How at Ravensbrück, she was with her sister, Betsy. And one day after working, she was put into this line, and Betsy was put into this one. And her sister was executed that day. This 80-year-old woman talked about how losing her sister created a rage inside of her, created a hatred and an anger toward these people that was going to be with her forever. Except for this, Jesus. Corrie ten Boom was in this camp, and rather than letting the hatred and the anger overcome her, she prayed for the guards. She prayed for the ones who executed her sister. She prayed for the ones who beat her when she was out working. And she decided, I'm not going to let death overtake me. I'm going to trust my life with Jesus, and I'm going to allow him and his will to be done in my life. This 80-year-old woman stands in front of this crowd and shares this story of forgiveness. Shares of the power of God in her life, the power of a relationship with Jesus, and encourages those who are sitting there listening to give their hearts to Jesus. That if they have hatred and anger and resentment and bitterness and every reason in the world to be angry at everybody, to hate their life, to hate the people around them, that Jesus could bring healing. That Jesus brings forgiveness. That Jesus can make a life whole. This 80-year-old woman finishes her message. Everyone stands to their feet and applauds. And everybody heads to the back door. Corrie, along with an assistant, made her way down the side steps of the stage, and when she reached the ground, she started to walk toward the center. And a very, very old man approached her. He stood directly in front of her, and he looked her in the eyes. She greeted him. She put out her hand. The tattoo from the concentration camp still on her wrist. And this very old man crumbles to the ground. He grabs onto her ankles and sobs over her feet. He hasn't said anything to her. As he's sobbing, she rests her hand on his shoulder, and she begins to hear him say, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He begins to gather himself, and this 80-year-old woman helps this 90-something-year-old man. It was quite the scene. Back to his feet. And the man wipes his eyes, and he says, "I was a guard at Ravensbrück. I am responsible for your sister's death. Years ago, I heard about Jesus. I even said a prayer. Okay, I'll believe. But all these years, I never believed that I could ever be whole again. But because of your story, because of what you shared here today, I can stand here and say with full confidence, I am loved. I am forgiven. And I wanted to come to you and seek your forgiveness." Now it's Corey's turn to cry. And they hold hands. And all of those feelings that she was tempted to have through those years when her sister was taken from her, when she was abused, when she had every reason to hate, she considered how that hatred could have overwhelmed her, how that anger that was justified would have destroyed her life. And she was able to look him in the eyes and say, "I forgive you." It was because of her story. This guy's in his 90s, the end of his life. And it was her story that finally communicated the truth, that God used to speak the truth into his heart of God's love for him. That he did not have to live in shame, that he can be forgiven. It was because of her story that he was able to experience redemption, that he was able to understand the fullness of God's love. That is the power that a person's story. In church, we call it a testimony. In court, you call it a testimony. The telling of how things are. The telling of your experiences. And your story matters. Your story makes a difference. It doesn't really even matter whether you believe it right now or not. Your story can make a difference. God can use your story. Your real life story.
My name's Kathy Godoy, and this is my story. I'm 23 years old, I live in Upland, California, and I've been married to my husband Ryan for almost 2 years. I was born into a Christian home. I grew up going to church in Chino, and it was normal. It was never anything significant. I didn't have a lot of friends at church. I went to church far away from my house, so that was difficult for me, and I didn't really get super connected. When I was 8, my brother was diagnosed with autism, and that was a huge thing for our family. It kind of changed how we viewed each other and how my parents viewed us as kids. My sister and I kind of grew up rather quickly and had to kind of take charge of our brother really fast and learn to deal with him and deal with his outbursts and how he dealt with life. When I was younger, I didn't see anything major coming out of that. As I got older and got into high school, going to college, I really felt like God was calling me towards pursuing studying autism. I really wanted to help kids with autism, especially at a young age when I know that's the most difficult part of it. I feel like one of the biggest moments for me personally was just as a family, we went to Israel, and that was one of the first times that I really felt like the Bible came alive to me, and I was walking where Jesus walked. I was in the Garden of Gethsemane where he wept, and that was something that was like very powerful to me, and that was probably one of the first moments that I felt my faith start to become real to me personally and not just kind of my parents' faith. When I was a freshman in high school, my sister got pregnant. She ended up having an abortion, which was something that I struggled with so much just because as a Christian, that's not something that we are okay with. And so having to go through that and kind of, there was nothing I could do, there's nothing I could say to her to help her feel better, and it was just kind of relying on God to heal her and heal all of us just as we dealt with that. I think one of the biggest things I felt with working at a church and working with kids is that God really kind of led me towards that. Having a brother with special needs and having to deal with the differences that he has and the different ways he acts kind of gives me a little bit of a softer heart towards kids that may not, that kind of act out. And so working in children's ministry, I'm able to kind of be there and see that as like more of an outside perspective, but then being able to volunteer in youth, I get to work closely with kids who come from all different backgrounds, and that's always been something that I've had a passion for. And so I really feel like God has led me through everything that I've been through in order to be used in this church and used in this youth. I've been working with a new ministry that's starting at church called Life Care, and that's something that I'm still wrestling with, how God can use me and how just how well he can use me in that. Even though I studied psychology and I've studied helping people, I still struggle with feeling adequate about it and feeling like I can help people in this church when I'm only 23. I haven't been through a ton of life and I don't have a ton of life experiences, but I do have a desire to help them and to help them through their life. Looking back, I've really enjoyed the life God's given me, and there's been ups and downs, but through it all, he's been faithful, and I know he's not done yet.
I learned some stuff about Kathy. How about you? And there are so many things that we can get from somebody's story. Some of the things that stuck out to me is just discovering where a person's heart is and the passions of their heart, the ways that God has taken life experience and used it. And you can look at some of the life experiences even that Kathy mentioned and go, oh my gosh, that must have been so hard. And of course, yet through her faith, seeing God work things out in that, seeing God take those difficult things and say to her and her family, watch me move. Watch what I can do to take the difficult things and bring life out of them and bring hope out of them. And one of the other things that I really appreciated Kathy sharing was, did you hear her say, and I've got this all figured out. I don't struggle with anything. I don't have any insecurities. I'm really good. So just kind of watch my life and you'll be fine. The fact that God is able and willing to use us when we struggle. When we go, God, how can you use this? How can you use me with a lack of experience, or when I've been through something so difficult, whatever it may be for you? But God is able to use it. And when we hear these stories, and every one of us in this room has a story. Do you realize that? Every single one of us in this room has a life story. And no two stories are going to be the same. There may be elements that are the same, that maybe you grew up in church or you didn't grow up in church, that your parents are married or that your parents are divorced. There may be similarities, but there are different things that have gone on in each of your lives that are important to be shared, that are important for people around you to know, so that they can walk alongside you, so that they can care for you, so they can discover more of who you are. I guarantee that there are really, really close relationships in this room that don't know some really important things about each other, because it doesn't exactly come up in biology class. It's not something you talk about at lunch maybe. But what about those important things? When do those things get shared? How can we discover them? And we are going to do something here at Youth Group over the next however many weeks it takes, that for some in this room, it's going to be like, oh, yeah, I've never done that. I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound good to me at all. Others of you, you're going to be like, yes, I love this. This is going to be so great. And then there's going to be everybody in the middle, in between those two things. But here's what we're going to do. We're beginning this series called Real Life Stories. We're starting this new school year. We've got detour groups together where it's by grade and gender. And rather than us just launching into, oh, well, let's go through the book of James. Oh, well, let's do a dating series where we can talk about relationships, all important things. Instead, as we prayed about it, we went, you know what? We want to know your story. Us as adult leaders, the detour group leaders, we want to know who you are. We want to know what your passions are. We want to know the struggles that you've gone through. We want to know where you're at in your faith. And rather than us just blast through and, okay, it's usually me up here talking or your detour group leader teaching or whatever it may be, this series is going to be all about you. And there are some reasons that we want to do this. As we break into detour groups, here's what's going to happen. Each week, we're going to break into detour groups, and 2 people each week are going to share their life story. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It doesn't have to be a speech. It doesn't have to be, well, at 4 years old, I became a meth addict. By 6, I was living on the streets. 7 years old, I stole my parents' car. And God redeemed me last Thursday. I use that as an example, and I think some of you in this room will understand what I'm saying. I use that as an example because I believed when I was in junior high and high school, I believed that that's what a testimony was. Me? I grew up in church. Never really did anything real rebellious, mostly because I'm a coward. My parents, my family, good family. I never suffered any tragedy. Pretty good life. I don't have a story. Every one of you has a story. Maybe your story is you grew up in church. But what has your faith, how has your faith grown through the years? How has your faith been tested? Even though you've been going to church, how has your faith been tested? How have you walked through? What are some things you've walked through? Maybe you're here and you're like, I'm not a Christian. I'm here because there's a cute guy that's over here and my friend brought me and I'm chasing a guy, I'm chasing a girl, whatever it may be. I'm really glad that you're here. Guess what? You have a story. You have a story, and there may be reasons that you have struggled in faith. There may be reasons that you have been leery to commit your life to Jesus. We want to know what those things are. We want to know your story. We want you to tell your story, and there's three big reasons we want you to tell your story. First, because your story matters. You're not going to bug anybody. It's not, oh, well, nobody cares about this. We do care. I'm telling you right now, we care. We all need to care because there is something we can learn from each other's story. The reason to share our story, because when we know each other, we can walk with each other. It would be ridiculous for us to keep breaking up into detour groups and the only thing we ever know is each other's first name. Or what school you go to. Or how many brothers and sisters you have. Or whether what movie you've seen recently. That would be a colossal waste of time. We don't want to just stay at this surfacey level. Because when we know each other, we can walk with each other. When you know that somebody has been through something difficult or is going through something difficult, you can walk with them. You can be a source of encouragement for them. You can have a heart of compassion for them. And we need to tell our story because when we let others know us, then we can know that we're not alone. I guarantee there are people in this room who think you are the only one who has been through what you've been through. I guarantee there's people in this room who think no one has had a life as hard as mine. Or no one has known sadness like me. Or no one is into the stuff that I'm into and has a passion for the things that I have a passion for. And how sad if we all just kept wandering around going, I'm alone. Nobody cares about the things I care about. Nobody knows what I've gone through. When we let each other know us, then we know we're not alone. And when we have these detour groups, we want this to be a time where we come together and we let ourselves be known. Now, that may be the scary part for you. Because I know that there are some in this room, you've never told people your story. And that's, it's not necessarily because you have such a bad story and it's so private. I bet there's a bunch of you in here, you've just never had the opportunity to tell your story. If we're going to be close, if this is going to be a place that is safe, if this is going to be a place where you know that you're loved and you're cared for, we have to know each other. And it may be scary. The idea of telling your story, the idea of speaking in front of others, may be something you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have an anxiety attack. Well, guess what? You're not alone. And we're not going to let you be alone. We're not going to just say, all right, Grady, ready, go. We're going to help you do this. We're going to walk with you. We're going to encourage you. We're not going to just throw you out there and expect things of you. We, as detour group leaders, we're going to walk with you. We're going to encourage you. We're going to show you what to do. We're going to start with us. Next week, your detour group leader is going to share their story. So you're going to get to know, all right, this person that I have to go and, so far they've maybe taught me some Bible things, or we've prayed together. You're going to get to know who they really are. And you're going to get to hear their story. And then, tonight, and this is what we're going to do tonight. We're going to break up into our detour groups. And you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions. You're going to have an opportunity to go like, well, what about this or what about that? We are going to give you an opportunity tonight to sign up for a week for you to share your story. And so there are a number of weeks on sheet, and there's going to be 2 people who share their story every week. And so you're going to get an opportunity to sign up for when you would like to share your story. We're also going to give you an outline. And this is the way that I think. And if this doesn't help you at all, then don't think this way. But this is kind of how I tend to think about life. We're going to give you an outline that will help you think through your life like scenes in a movie. Imagine if they were going to make a movie about your life. I mean, for me, Denzel Washington would clearly be. What are the scenes in your life? What are the things in the beginning where you've come from? What are some of the tensions and the things that maybe were conflict or difficult? What are some of the things that got resolved? What are some of the questions that you've had? And we're going to give you a worksheet for you to be able to look at to write out your story. You're going to have an opportunity to write out your story. You're going to have the opportunity to share that with your detour group leader. Like, hey, this is what I wrote. What else should I write? And they will walk with you through that. And then on the night that you sign up for, you'll be able to share your story. If it's a thing where you need to just read it, you'll be able to read it. If you want to just talk about your story, you can do it that way. And I see a variety of expressions across the room right now, which is awesome, which demonstrates you're all different. Even the way you handle this is going to be different. And there's no right or wrong. Let me tell you what I don't want. I don't want a bunch of religious statements. I don't want you to think that you have to use the right holy words. I don't want you to think that you have to make stuff up so that you sound like a good person. I don't want you to have to make something up if you're in a place where you're discovering what faith is and who Jesus is, and you're like, I don't have this belief at all. I want you to be real. We call this series Real Life Stories, because I don't want this to just be something that, well, I'm going to say what they want me to say. We want to know you. We want to know who you are and what you're doing. So, how will God, remember I started this with talking about Corey's story. And then we saw a bit of Kathy's story. That's not all of Kathy's story. We saw a bit of Kathy's story. How will God use your story? And if we are honest, the only honest answer to how will God use your story, the only honest answer would be what? I don't know. I don't know. And I want to encourage you not to let fear, not to let the fact that you've never done something like this before, not to let the fact that maybe you're kind of new here and you don't have a big group of friends here. I want to encourage you not to let that stop you from sharing something that God can use in a powerful way. You don't know how God's going to use your story. And this is so important to us that we're going for it. We're not going, oh, well, what if nobody wants to? What if it? This is that important. And I believe that people have a story to share. People have a story to tell. And again, let me say, you're not going to be alone in this. We're not going to just expect you to do your best. We're going to walk with you through this. We want you to be able to ask questions and do all that.